The National Electrical Code (NEC) does not mandate a disconnect at each individual motor if the motor starters are designed to be individually disabled. The presence of a main disconnect at the enclosure, capable of cutting off power to all motors collectively, fulfills the code's stipulation for a disconnecting means applicable to all motors involved. NEC section 430.102b provides further clarification, stating that each motor must have its own disconnecting means. However, it also addresses scenarios where a single motor operates multiple driven machines. In such cases, the disconnecting means should be situated in the motor circuit upstream of the point where the circuit branches off to serve the various driven machines. Now, let's consider the use of SOCORD. SOCORD is not approved for permanent wiring installations within electrical enclosures according to the NEC. Its intended application is for temporary connections or portable equipment. NEC section 336.10 explicitly prohibits the installation of SOCORD in raceways, embedding it within the structural elements of a building, or concealing it behind walls or ceilings. Considering electrical enclosures containing multiple motor starters supplying power to multiple motors, the primary concern revolves around ensuring that a means exists to safely disconnect power from each motor for maintenance or in emergency situations. The NEC provides flexibility in how this requirement is met. The NEC permits the use of a single disconnect to serve multiple motors under specific conditions, such as when the motor starters are individually lockable or capable of being de-energized independently. This arrangement is acceptable because it provides a reliable method for isolating each motor circuit. The main disconnect, located at the electrical enclosure, can serve as the disconnecting means for all motors. This is especially true if the motor starters themselves have a means of being locked out or towed out, complying with safety procedures. This setup ensures that qualified personnel can safely work on individual motors without the risk of accidental energization. Understanding the implications of NEC section 430.102b is crucial. The requirement for an individual disconnecting means for each motor is paramount for safety. This ensures that maintenance or repairs can be performed safely on one motor without affecting the others. However, the code recognizes that having a single disconnecting means for multiple motors is permissible under certain conditions, streamlining the installation and reducing cost while maintaining a high level of safety. Now let's delve into the limitations of SOCORD. SOCORD, characterized by its flexibility and durability, is commonly used for portable tools and equipment. However, the NEC restricts its use as permanent wiring within electrical enclosures due to its susceptibility to damage from physical stress, chemicals, and environmental factors. NEC section 336.10 explicitly prohibits SOCORD from being installed in raceways or embedded in building structures. The reason behind this restriction is to prevent potential hazards such as electrical shock or fire. Permanent wiring should be installed using approved wiring methods, such as conduit or cable, which provide better mechanical protection and meet the requirements for long-term reliability and safety. The distinction between temporary and permanent wiring is fundamental to electrical safety. Temporary wiring is typically used for construction sites or other short-term applications and is subject to different requirements than permanent wiring. SOCORD is suitable for temporary wiring, provided it is properly sized and protected from physical damage. However, it should never be used as a substitute for permanent wiring methods. When designing or installing electrical systems, it's important to consult the NEC and other applicable standards to ensure compliance and safety. Ignoring these requirements can lead to serious consequences, including property damage, injury, or even death. To provide additional clarity, let's consider a scenario where an electrical enclosure houses motor starters for 3 separate motors. Each motor starter has a built-in disconnect switch that can be individually locked out. In this case, the main disconnect at the enclosure can serve as the disconnecting means for all 3 motors, provided that the disconnect switches and the motor starters are readily accessible and can be locked in the open position. However, if the motor starters do not have individual disconnect switches, then a separate disconnect switch must be installed for each motor. Now, let's address the question of whether SOCORD can be used to connect the motors to the motor starters. According to the NEC, cord is not permitted for this application. The wiring between the motor starters and the motors must be done using an approved wiring method such as THHN conductors and conduit or MC cable. These wiring methods provide better mechanical protection and are suitable for permanent installations. It's important to remember that the NEC is a comprehensive set of rules and regulations that are designed to ensure electrical safety. It's essential to consult the NEC and other applicable standards when designing or installing electrical systems. Failure to comply with these requirements can have serious consequences. In summary, while a disconnect at every motor is not always required if starters can be individually disabled and a main disconnect exists, cord is prohibited for permanent wiring inside enclosures. Always adhere to the NEC and local codes. Firstly, the NEC provides specific guidelines for disconnecting means for motors, emphasizing the need for safety and accessibility during maintenance and emergencies. Secondly, cord has limitations and should not be used as a substitute for permanent wiring methods in electrical enclosures. Thirdly, compliance with the NEC is essential for preventing electrical hazards and ensuring the safety of people and property. Consider a panel with 3 motor starters, each controlling a separate motor. These starters are equipped with individual lockable disconnect switches, and the panel itself has a main disconnect. This configuration generally meets NEC requirements because each motor circuit can be independently isolated, and the entire panel can be de-energized via the main disconnect. However, if those motor starters lacked individual disconnects, then individual disconnects for each motor would likely be required within sight of the motor or lockable from the motor location. This is to ensure safety during maintenance and repairs. cord is flexible and oil-resistant, making it suitable for portable applications where equipment needs to be moved or repositioned frequently. Think of a portable generator connected to a temporary lighting setup on a construction site, or a power cord for a heavy-duty appliance in a factory. These are appropriate uses for cord, provided the cord is properly sized for the load and protected from damage. However, using cord inside a control panel to permanently wire components would violate the NEC. For permanent wiring, you need methods like THHN conductors and conduit or appropriately rated cable, which offer better protection against physical damage and environmental factors. Understanding the distinction between temporary and permanent wiring is crucial. Temporary wiring is typically used for a limited time and under specific conditions, such as during construction or for events. It's subject to different requirements than permanent wiring, which is designed for long-term use and must meet more stringent standards. Using the wrong type of wiring for an application can create a safety hazard. For example, using cord for permanent wiring could lead to insulation breakdown, short circuits, and even fires. The NEC exists to minimize these risks by specifying approved wiring methods for different applications. Let's imagine a scenario where a maintenance worker needs to repair one of the motors controlled by the panel we discussed earlier. If the motor starter has a lockable disconnect switch, the worker can simply open the switch, lock it out, and safely work on the motor. The other motors can continue to operate without interruption. If, on the other hand, the motor starter lacks a disconnect switch, the worker would have to shut down the entire panel using the main disconnect, which would disrupt the operation of all 3 motors. This highlights the importance of having individual disconnects for each motor, as it allows for more efficient and safer maintenance. Similarly, consider the potential consequences of using cord for permanent wiring. Over time, the cord could become damaged from abrasion, chemicals, or extreme temperatures. This could lead to exposed conductors, creating a risk of electric shock or fire. By using approved wiring methods, these risks can be significantly reduced. The NEC isn't just a set of rules, it's a set of best practices developed over decades to protect people and property from electrical hazards. It's based on scientific research, industry experience, and input from experts in the field. By following the NEC, you can ensure that your electrical installations are safe, reliable, and compliant with the law. Firstly, always consult the latest version of the NEC and any applicable local codes before designing or installing electrical systems. Secondly, understand the difference between temporary and permanent wiring and use the appropriate wiring methods for each application. Thirdly, when in doubt, consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer. A common misconception is that SoCord is a universal wiring solution that can be used in any application. This is simply not true. SoCord is designed for specific purposes and should only be used in accordance with the NEC and the manufacturer's instructions. Another misconception is that individual disconnects for each motor are always required. While this is often the case, there are exceptions, as we discussed earlier. The key is to understand the requirements of the NEC and to apply them correctly to your specific situation. Consider a situation where an electrician needs to install a new motor in a factory. The electrician consults the NEC and determines that the motor requires a dedicated disconnect switch within sight of the motor. The electrician installs the disconnect switch and wires the motor using THHN conductors and conduit. The installation is safe, compliant, and reliable. In another scenario, a homeowner decides to replace the power cord on their washing machine with a longer SoCord. The homeowner is unaware that the NEC prohibits the use of SoCord for permanent wiring. Over time, the SoCord becomes damaged and causes a fire, resulting in significant property damage. This example illustrates the importance of following the NEC and using the correct wiring methods for each application. The NEC is constantly evolving to keep pace with new technologies and changing safety standards. It's essential to stay up to date on the latest requirements and to apply them correctly. Firstly, regularly review the NEC and other applicable standards. Secondly, attend training courses and workshops to enhance your knowledge and skills. Thirdly, consult with experienced professionals when faced with challenging electrical installations. Think about a large industrial facility with hundreds of motors. Each motor is critical to the operation of the facility, and downtime can be very costly. To minimize downtime, the facility implements a comprehensive maintenance program that includes regular inspections, testing, and repairs. As part of the program, each motor is equipped with a dedicated disconnect switch that allows maintenance workers to safely isolate the motor without disrupting the operation of other equipment. The facility also uses approved wiring methods for all permanent electrical installations, ensuring that the electrical system is safe, reliable, and compliant with the NEC. Or a construction site where temporary power is needed for tools and equipment. The contractor uses SoCord to connect the equipment to temporary power sources. However, the contractor takes care to protect the SoCord from physical damage and to ensure that it is properly sized for the load. The contractor also regularly inspects the SoCord for signs of wear and tear and replaces it as needed. The contractor understands that temporary wiring must be installed and maintained in accordance with the NEC to prevent electrical hazards. The purpose of the NEC is to provide a framework for safe electrical installations. It's not intended to be a rigid set of rules that stifle innovation or creativity. Instead, it's intended to be a flexible guide that can be adapted to meet the needs of different applications. However, it's important to remember that safety is always the top priority. The NEC should never be compromised in the name of cost savings or convenience. The NEC is a living document that is constantly being updated to reflect the latest knowledge and experience. The process of updating the NEC involves input from a wide range of stakeholders, including electrical engineers, electricians, manufacturers, and regulators. This collaborative approach ensures that the NEC is both technically sound and practical to implement. The NEC isn't just a set of rules, it's a testament to the power of collaboration and the commitment to safety. Remember that electrical safety is a shared responsibility. It's up to everyone to do their part to ensure that electrical installations are safe and compliant with the NEC. This includes designers, installers, inspectors, and users. By working together, we can create a safer environment for everyone. Firstly, promote electrical safety awareness in your community. Secondly, report any electrical hazards to the appropriate authorities. Thirdly, support the development and implementation of effective electrical safety standards. Electrical installations can be complex and challenging. It's essential to have a thorough understanding of the NEC and other applicable standards. If you're not sure about something, don't hesitate to ask for help from a qualified professional. It's always better to be safe than sorry.